Hello, everybody. Welcome to another forecast. This time we're going to be looking at the astrology of December. And I am Claire Moon. If you're new, we're going to be talking about astrology for the month of December. We do this every month. I call it Virtual Astrology Club. If you're coming back, welcome. Thanks for coming on back. There is a live chat. I like to do this live so that we have an opportunity to mingle, that we have an opportunity to ask questions. So if you are a nerd, if you have questions, if you have experiences, please put them in the chat. There is about a 20-second delay. So if I don't see it right away, give me uno momento. I'll be checking in with it periodically throughout the hour, 2 hours. These have been running like 2 hours. Hello, Kyra. Welcome back. A familiar face is always nice to see. If you find any help, if this is helping you, or if you're like, yep, this is landing, definitely hit the like button, subscribe if you haven't subscribed already. If you're interested in getting a reading, I am a consulting astrologer. So books are wide open. I'm only really booked out right now until like second week of December. So you can still get in pretty quick if you need to get in quickly. With that, let's get the wheel up here. Let's share my screen. Hopefully you can see that now. All righty. Awesome. So right now, it's not quite December. I'm going to actually look at the weather right now because it's kind of interesting and I feel like it's worth talking about. I actually just did a video I'll show you here with my little pen, on all of this stuff opposing Mars. I just did a video on that and I did rising sign horoscopes. So if you haven't already checked that out, go check that out. It's really going to dive into that configuration more specifically. I spend a good hour on it. And, that is what's going on. So let's see how we're going to enter into this month of December 2022. It's spicy skies. The skies are spicy. If it serves you, I am recommending restraint. I am recommending temperance from now until like the first week of December. Things are going to be fast and loose for the next 2 weeks. And that can be really fun. It can be really sexy, but it also can get us into a little bit of trouble. And I don't want us getting to this full moon that we're going to be talking about that's on December 6th, December 7th, and then regretting what we've done the last, like the couple weeks leading up to that full moon. Temperance hat, temperance pants, temperance mittens, all of the temperance things. Let me show you right now. This very day, we've got Mercury, who's the first to do this opposition. All of these three personal planets, the Sun, Venus, and Mercury, are each going to be taking their turn in opposing Mars. And I think how this is going to play out. So let's dig into this just for a second. Sorry if you've watched my other video and this is repeat, but Sagittarius is a place of fire. And when we have fire, what we want to be doing is acting, emitting, exuding ourselves, expressing ourselves, doing the damn thing. And Venus makes it more connecting, more charming, more effervescent. So she is helping. Like Venus here definitely helps to smooth some of the more prickly edges of this configuration. That being said, Mercury is leading the way right now. Mercury is our voice. It's the way that we think. It's our words. It's listening. It's speaking. And the Sun is here as well. Our will, our embodiment of ourselves. And they are all in this really fiery place, which at best is just like super enthusiastic, very excited, very wanting to like share in a spirit of, Jupiterian, jovial, I don't know, happiness, joy. It's like, this excites me. Maybe you'll like it too. At worst, Sagittarius can become a place where those beliefs, Sagittarius is about belief, philosophy, thought, or, large overarching thoughts. It can get a little zealous. It can get a little self-righteous. I personally have some things in my chart in Sagittarius. So I speak from a place of experience, like, I can burn with the fires of self-righteousness with the best of them. And that is the energy that we're in. It's spicy skies. And I know that we've already had over here in the United States, we just had a holiday weekend where people were traveling to see family, notorious for, our family gatherings. We have arguments sometimes. hopefully that didn't happen to you. But here's the rub with it all, is that we've got this really bright, shiny, effervescent, I want to share my beliefs. Venus is here. Maybe I want to connect with others through shared beliefs, through shared thought. But who are they running up against? And it's Mars, who can be a little abrasive, a little, I don't like using the word selfish just right off of the bat, but it is singular. Mars is singular. It is my motivation, what I want to do, what I want to think, what I want to say. And it is in the place of saying, thinking, and speaking about things in Gemini. If Sagittarius is more about coalescing all of our thoughts into something that's meaningful, Gemini is about asking questions. It's about debating, skepticism, doubting, questioning, right? So you can imagine how this could end up being a bit of a conflict type of energy. One thing that I did want to mention with this, though, is that, right now we might be, I've been talking about this more in terms of like external conflict between one or more people. It doesn't actually have to be that. This can also be an internal conflict. Generally, fire and air, they are more external, more out there in the world. That being said, I mean, this could very well be an internal conflict between two, bodies of thought or many pieces of information in your mind that are conflicting, that aren't going together, so it might not be that we're expressing anything right now. It might not be that, oh, you're out there in the world, just like, causing kerfuffles left and right. I don't mean to say that. You might be, I mean, if that's you, like, slow your roll, but it could just be an internal conflict of thought. Like, I thought this was this way, and now I'm getting this new information, and those two things don't really go together. Hang in there for another 10 days. I really want to see the full moon that we're going to talk about. That's going to be right here. The moon is going to join Mars in Gemini for the full moon. And that is really going to be an interesting culmination of whatever conflicts we're having internally or externally. And I mean, kind of what I said too in my other video about this configuration is that conflict is but one thing, whether it's internally or externally. We also might just be having a balancing act, like a lot of activity pulling us in this direction, a lot of activity pulling us in the other direction with Gemini. So, it could just be trying to hold space for a lot of goings on and a lot of happenings in our life, and they're only being 24 hours in a day. So it could just be that balancing act as well, and kind of the tension and busyness that we can feel because of that. So that's how we're starting the month. That's how we're entering the month of December. What else? Mars is currently finishing up the second of 3 trines with Saturn. So if we're looking at that, this is an ongoing story where we've got Saturn up here. We've also got Mars, and they're both in air signs trining each other. A trine is a really harmonious aspect. It's free flowing. The information from Aquarius is currently flowing very easily to Gemini and vice versa. So intellectually speaking, our ability to plan, our ability to put together a system, put together ways of doing things. If you're working on constructing something in your life right now, that kind of discipline of Saturn and motivation and drive of Mars is a really neat combination. So as much as there's a lot of scatteredness with Mars and Gemini, there's a lot of mental restlessness, a lot of places that are calling for our mental attention and focus. Saturn is really keeping things on the tracks. They are providing a nice mental container for all of this mental energy with Mars and Gemini. So we're perfecting that, the second of 3 trines that's happening. We're going over some territory that we actually crossed for the first time on September 28th. So if you want to think back to something that, maybe a system in your life in the Aquarius place of your chart, something that you're working on, it could be so many different things. Maybe a place in life in Gemini where you're holding some restraint. Think back to the end of September. See if any kind of themes are coming back. Always look at the house that Aquarius and Gemini are in, and look at those house topics to get more clues as to what exactly it could be about. And then the last of these three is going to be, it's actually going to be once they both move into their next water sign on April 1st of next year. So this is a long story with whatever we're building, whatever we're reconstructing in Aquarius and that part of our life. This is really the middle part of that story right now. So it's by no means over. So that was another thing that was happening before December. I can't remember how much I said about it in the November forecast, but if we want to look, the other thing I like to look at as far as now getting into December, I guess let's just go over the dates, and I'll put these below if I haven't already. I can't remember if I did that either. On the 3rd of December, we have Neptune stationing direct. On the 5th of December, we've got Mercury making its appearance in the evening sky, doing its phasis. We'll talk about that. On the 6th of December, Mercury is going to ingress into Capricorn. On the 7th is the Gemini full moon, conjunct Mars. On the 9th is Venus going into Capricorn. On the 19th of December, Venus is going to do their appearance in the evening sky, very bright and shiny. And then on the 20th, we're going to have Jupiter going into Aries. We've got Sun's ingress into Capricorn on the 21st, saying hello, Capricorn season. Capricorn New Moon on the 23rd. And then finally, Mercury, very quickly, it was in the sky, and then it's going to start to disappear on the 30th. So those are big, important dates for the month. Let me check in with this chat and see if anybody showed up. Oh my gosh, people did. Oh, hello, Adam. Welcome back. Hello, RC from Melbourne, Australia. Oh yeah, it's like the next day over there. I hope you're having a good morning, afternoon. Oh, hi, Jeff. I hope things are going okay for you. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for joining. What kind of comments do we got? Yeah, the restraint. So Jeff is saying, hi, Claire, you're right about the restraint. I had this come up and bite me this weekend. I was personally this close from doing something that I probably would have regretted. And it was like the last second I could have pulled out. So you're not alone. Like, this is hard. And, Mars in Gemini, it went in there in August, end of August. Like, we've been dealing with this for a few months now, and to continue to have to put in a little bit of restraint, to continue to be really temperate in the way we're communicating with people is like, it's so difficult. I mean, even like on Twitter, it's happened a couple of times now where I've made a tweet and I have to follow it up with, hey, I could really sound like an asshole here, and I really don't mean to, so I've had to even check myself before I wreck myself. It's been a lot of energy to hold space for sure. Oh yeah, I do actually have the chart at Cancer rising. I didn't mean that, Kyra, but yeah, how convenient for you. Got some family action going on. Yeah, so lots to do just with that opposition. Mercury is going to oppose Mars, and then Venus, and then, the sun lags behind a little bit, but yeah, there's a lot of busyness. Oh, hello, Breeze Key. Hello. Thanks for joining us. No, you didn't miss anything yet. We're going to jump into December now. We're going to do it now. Okay. So let's see. I like to always start with just kind of an overview of the qualities, the planets in, how many planets do we have in each element? How many planets do we have in each modality, whether that's, cardinal, fixed, mutable. And this month, we're starting off with just a ton of mutability. So right now we've got, 3 planets in Sag. We've got a couple in Pisces. We've got Mars and Gemini. This is the mutable modality. And this modality, it represents the change of season, from season to season. So it's very adaptable. These signs are flexible. They're willing to change. They're willing to experiment with things. Sometimes it's hard to focus when planets are in these places. It's hard to just stick to one thing. That's more fixed sign territory. So this month starts off incredibly mutable. And then what's going to happen is, as we march all these planets into Capricorn later on, and Jupiter is going to end up over here in Aquarius, we're going to end up with a lot more cardinality. And so I think how that's going to come out is things, we're going to settle on some things. We're going to settle on some plans, some people, places, things, and we're going to be able to focus on those a little better. So I would say, before December 10th, let yourself be kind of all over the place. For the first week of December, at least, we're still very mutable. Things are adaptable, changeable. I wouldn't be trying to commit to anything during that first week of December. But then after that, once we get all these planets starting to go into the cardinal signs, it's going to be really clear what we want to focus on, what we want to really start to invest into with more focus. So that's one overarching consideration. Another is just that we're, element wise, we've got a lot of fire and air right now. I'm not paying attention to the moon. Sorry, moon. Besides Jupiter and just considering visible planets here for a second, I'm not going to worry about the outers because the visible planets are more the ones that speak to our daily lived personal experience, kind of what we're feeling on the ground. A lot of air, a lot of fire. This is, again, very externally exuding ourselves, acting, saying, doing the things externally. What we're going to get more and more of toward the middle of the month is more action in earth. And it's going to be, we'll still have Jupiter here in water until about the 20th or so. So I think like mid-month, we're going to get more of a quieting. What's the word? Mercury's in Sag. I've been tripping over my words like crazy. Things are going to quiet down. We're going to maybe go more internal. We're going to be less, shouting things from the rooftops. And that'll be more mid-month. Now at the end of the month though, once we get Jupiter back into fire, back into this sextile with Mars, kind of shooting its energy down there pretty easily, things are going to get louder again. So there's like, in the middle of a month, there's like this dip of coming into more of a quieter, internally focused kind of energy in the middle of December. And then we get a little bit more fire at the end. So overall, things end up way earthy, way cardinal at the end, which is very different than right now, which is very mutable and very fiery and airy. So that is the overall kind of quality of the month. What else? I think that's it. Let's get into the details. So first things first, when we finally get to December 1st here, what we're starting off with, now I'd mentioned all these planets in Sag opposing Mars one by one. They're also going to be squaring Neptune and by sign Jupiter one by one. So first we get Mercury, and anytime Mercury is square Neptune, Mercury opposite Neptune, so any of those hard angles. Personally, in my own life, I employ the Mercury retrograde protocols, and my Mercury retrograde protocols are, double checking things. Mercury is in its what we call detriment in Hellenistic astrology in Sagittarius, meaning Mercury is not at its strongest. It's not given the resources, maybe even the pacing, the time that it might need to be really discerning and careful in what it's doing. And then Neptune just adds fog, it adds uncertainty. It's just not a great time for signing contracts, all the Mercury retrograde things. It's not a great time for making purchases. It's not a great time for commerce, for communications. So it's not like the world just stops though. I'm sure everyone's trying to buy gifts for holidays later in December. So it's not like we're not going to be doing these things, but check the fine print. If you're reading anything, read it twice. Don't comment on an article you haven't read. Just making sure that our rational faculties are being given the time that they need to make a really thoughtful decision. I think sometimes in Sagittarius, it's not that we're not good at thinking. It's not that we're not good at discernment, but it's so fast and fiery in Sagittarius that we can kind of speed by things and miss things. So, and even with the wider picture of Sagittarius and the wider picture of Pisces, they're kind of, leaned back and looking at the whole deal. We lose sight of the little details. So when we have Neptune involved, making things uncertain, having our overactive imagination, imagining things, seeing things the way we would like to see them, that is when we can get ourselves into trouble a little bit. Venus being here, which they will eventually do this square as well, is adding a relational component to this. So if you are trying to do a deal with somebody, buying and selling from a person on eBay or something like that. Just making sure that, there's no shenanigans or anything going on. So that's how we start off the month. How nice. At the same time, it is kind of a dreamy, artistic thing. There's a lot of hope, like between the square of Pisces and Sagittarius. There's just like so much enthusiasm and hope and optimism, and like that's really, really beautiful. So what I think would be a good use of this time would be to take advantage of that feeling of inspiration, that feeling of how things could be, the vision of it, and just keep that in the back of your mind. There's nothing wrong with employing the imagination. There's nothing wrong with dreaming up big dreams. And I think once the planets start to move into Capricorn later, it'll be clear what of those dreams and visions we can actually make real. With the resources that we have. So right now feels like a really good idea to actually be inspired. Allow yourself to be inspired. Allow yourself to be optimistic, as long as you're not like signing on a bunch of dotted lines about a bunch of things. So that's happening. At the same time, we have Venus, who's going to be in a nice sextile on this 1st of December with Saturn. So this helps. This is a bit of a reality check. Saturn is realism. It's our limitations, our constraints. They're in very analytical Aquarius, helping us to, understand. It's basically what I'm saying. It's like, yes, we can see clearly that we may be overly optimistic, but there can be a rational use for that energy. So, Saturn is helping keep things on the rails. I like that. Then, we're still, this is just so close to that Mars opposition. Venus has at this point already done their opposition with Mars. So Venus, right at the end of November, is going to be opposing Mars. And again, it's just all the things I was mentioning earlier about potentially having conversations with people that get escalated really quickly into conflict, having misunderstandings with like how our message is coming out versus how it's being received. And that is now in the rear view technically, but it's still really, really close. This is very spicy still. So again, I just really like that Saturn is helping to keep things on the rails for us at this time. And then if we move to the 2nd, then we get Moon in action-oriented Aries. And at this point, like, a lot of this creativity and generativeness of those Sagittarian and Pisces squares that are happening, if we do have things to act on, it might be easier to do those actions on the 2nd of December, if there are any. It's a good day in general for getting things done. Now we're going to be having the Moon in that sextile with Saturn. So it's not only Venus in this nice sextile, but we also have the Moon. So I like this. When planets are all in sextiles with each other, it's like, according to some of the ancient authors, half as good as a trine. I don't remember which one said that. I never do, but one of them said that. A sextile is half as good as a trine. So if a trine is this really free-flowing, easeful connection between these two energies, with a sextile, we get some of that. We might have to put in a little bit of effort. We might have to make sure the other party or the other thing is meeting us halfway. But this is really constructive energy to me. This is a lot of constructive energy. So like the 2nd of December, the 3rd of December, we get that same type of energy. I really like that for just getting things done, doing the communication writing that we need to do, that we have double checked and triple checked. And then on the 4th, this is when we get that Venus square Neptune. So this is, not the sun. There we go. Such a nice little square. So this is like, if you're like dating, like this is having no expectations, enjoy the evening, have a good time, make some art, but do your best not to make expectations about the outcomes of whoever you're connecting with, whatever you're generating or creating. This is a really good, like in the moment, good feels, even I guess if it's Saturday night where you are, depending on what time zone you're in, we're still going to have the Moon in Aries. which is much more fiery. It's like going out there, having a good time out there in the world. That's like Saturday night. And then we get home into Moon into Taurus into Sunday morning. So that feels really, really nice. All of this just feels kind of nice. So I really like the 4th for kind of chilling out, making some really nice connections with people that just feel good in the moment. But again, because Neptune is here, it makes things really unstable. The moon is with Uranus and Rahu. Not a lot of stability there either, in a place that we would expect some stability usually in Taurus, but there's not a lot of stability to this. So again, just enjoy yourself on the 4th and then let it go, enjoy whatever's happening that day while it's there and try not to make it into anything else. And it might, I mean, if you meet somebody, that's fine, but just like give it a lunar cycle, give it a month or something to make sure that it's actually real. So then moving on. Beep, beep, beep. On the 5th, then we get our Mercury squaring Neptune and Jupiter. So I had mentioned, or we get, Mercury squaring Jupiter. So, Neptune is still here, but Mercury has moved beyond that. Jupiter itself generally is about truth. It's about understanding things. And it doesn't, the fact that Mercury is separating from Neptune, it's moving toward Jupiter. This does feel like, okay, now we might be able to see at the end of the day, what is real? What did we imagine during all of those, during Mercury and Venus's square with Neptune? Now we're seeing maybe what was real about that, or understanding a little bit more. Sometimes with Pisces, especially, the understanding is internal. It's kind of like your own personal aha moment, or, okay, I get this now. I get the fuller picture now. I see the wider view of things. So I think that might be more available to us on the 5th and the 6th as Mercury is squaring Jupiter. Alternatively, if it's not, and it's a square. So I don't think this is going to be super comfortable. Like, a square is of the nature of Mars. And so it speaks to something that might be a little crunchy. Maybe we had hoped for something. Maybe there was some false optimism that we're like, but what's really here is not corroborating with what I had hoped for. The energy of that is that of a square. It's not super comfortable, but at the same time, it helps us to problem solve. Problem solving a square is usually very satisfying and helps us stay on track. So we've got our thinking hat on with Mercury, and we're trying to put all the pieces together with Jupiter. Worst case here, I think just that enthusiasm, Mercury in those last couple degrees of Sagittarius, just hang in there. This is like that last bastion of having to have restraint. I really just want us to wait at least until Mercury gets into Capricorn before we start saying stuff and doing things in like a really permanent, steadfast kind of way. But we might be at the end of our rope at this point. We might be really trying to, bite our tongue, and we might have a lot of things to say at that point. So, and it might be because we finally understand something and we don't want to wait to share it. Now, at this point as well, we also have the moon with Uranus. So this is adding on the 5th of December. If there was any confusion, if there are any crunchy, like, okay, the facts and details and wider picture versus what I had hoped for, what the optimism was, the moon is not really helping us in regards of stability, I don't think, because it is having to contend with Uranus, and Uranus brings surprises. Uranus brings unexpected things. It also can help us innovate. It can help us try new things. So if you do in this square have to solve a problem on the 5th, the moon in Uranus could be showing us a different way to do things. And it can be rather uncomfortable. Uranus can be sometimes like stepping out of our comfort zone to do something. So if on the 5th you are posed with a challenge, but you're also posed with a different way of handling it than you normally would, I would recommend on taking that new path and taking the new maybe out of your comfort zone way of doing things. Because usually when we do that, I think that if Uranus is capable of rewarding us, I don't know if they are, that would be the situation where we okay, Uranus, I see you, I'll do the weird thing, fine, we'll do the novel thing, and then it ends up paying off. On the 5th as well, we've got the sun, who is now within striking distance of Mars. We are in that magical 3-degree, now these planets are really heating up. So over the next 3 days, from December 5th, December 6th, December 7th, we're going to be having now our Sagittarian will, our desire, like the sun is my autonomy. It's like, I want to do that thing. I want to go on that mission. I would like to pursue this, this, and that. And it's based on our understanding, truth, knowledge, Jupiter words. And again, we're running into this questioning. We're running into this skepticism. Maybe our actions just are not working and we're spinning our tires. Maybe mentally we're just spinning our tires because Mars is retrograde. It's not moving forward. It's not going in the constructive path. Right now, Mars retrograde is more like we're reconsidering how we think about things. We're reconsidering the information we're taking in. It's not really helping us to come to a cohesive view. And that is kind of frustrating for these Sagittarian planets. So, and this is building up to a full moon. So that the tension and the energy just in general might be kind of a lot by this point. Let's see. And then on the 6th, so we're, like I mentioned, we're building up the energy, the tension, generic quotes around energy, whatever that means in your life. Definitely look at the houses. Where is Gemini? Where is Sagittarius in your chart? That is going to help you specify, okay, is this happening in my bank account, or is this happening at work? Is this happening with my spouse? Like, try to find that out. Yeah, because that's going to help you like know where to keep your temperance hat on. On the 6th, we're going to get our first Capricorn ingress here. And just in time, thank fluff and fluff, because we're going to need that really cool, calm, and collected rationality, I think, for all of this energy. Let's check in before I get into that full moon, because that's where we're going next. I want to check up at the comments. There's a lot of them, which is so fun. Oh, hi, Stacy from the Bay Area. One of my besties is from out there. I've been going there like probably every year lately. I feel like I've been going to the Bay Area. I love it. Oh, we got someone from Maryland. Welcome. Oh, hello, Dux Noctis. I know who you are now. Hello. Yeah, I'm also excited for the cardinality, Kyra. We need all of these types of periods. We need the mutability for a while. We need the cardinal stuff for a while. We need the fixed energy for a while. But yeah, when it's like all of the planets in one type for a while, it gets to be a little much. Yeah. And it depends on your birth chart too. If you've got a really mutable birth chart, like it probably isn't affecting you that much. If you're a fixie like me and you're a fixed sign, it's just like, wow, can we just like stick to something, anything? Can I just have some information hold for more than 3 days before something comes in that changes my mind? It's really a lot. A lot. Awesome comments. Thanks, everybody. Oh, hello from Arizona. Welcome. Thanks, everybody. Okay. So just in time for this full moon that's about to happen, conjunct Mars, we get one little bit here that can get out of this mutability and have a bit of a different perspective. Although, what's kind of interesting about this too is that by whole sign, Mercury is also in aversion to these places, meaning it doesn't really have, like the sign of Capricorn, for instance, doesn't have a ton in common with Sagittarius, nor does Capricorn have a ton in common with Gemini. We got earth, air. We got, if you do the gendered way of looking at it, feminine, masculine, like they're very different. And thus Mercury and Gemini planets have a hard time connecting. And Mercury is also going to have a hard time connecting with Venus and Sun. But at the same time, it's kind of like our minds, like our rational faculties with Mercury, they're able to sit this one out a bit. And in that sitting out, I don't know how much they'll be able to influence the full moon, but they're also getting out of that energy and they're able to think maybe a little bit more coolly and rationally and clear-headedly in a more realistic way. I mean, that's what Capricorn does best, is they are Saturn. It's what is real, what are the physical real world limitations to all of this action that's happening in the rest of the chart. So I like that. I saw that and I kind of went, ooh, like I was very happy to see that. Now, another thing to put on that stack of things, we got this full moon, which I will talk about. Then we've got a layer of Mercury kind of being a little removed from the situation, but also then able to be a bit more objective. Mercury's also making its appearance in the night sky. It's doing this thing called phasis, where when a planet is within 15 degrees of the sun on either side, by conjunction, it disappears in the night sky. We can't see it anymore. So 15 degrees is more of like a kind of a mathematical convention that we have. It, depending on where you are, your light pollution, your horizon, your atmospheric conditions, sometimes it's less than 15 degrees that Mercury pops up into view. In this case, in the evening sky, it'll be right after the sun sets. Maybe, depending on your conditions, you'll be able to see Mercury as a faint point of light in the evening. But yeah, once it gets out, once it's, or if it's under those 15 degrees, we can't see it. Once it gets out from that, then it makes its appearance. And symbolically, when a planet is hidden from the sky, it means that it's harder for us to see that planet doing its things. It might even have that planet having a harder time doing its things. Depending on the ancient author that you're reading, some of them talk about the planet under the beams being more ineffective, having a harder time struggling. Kind of like if, you're really close to the sun, it's like so extremely hot and like you're dehydrated and you can't think straight because you're so hot and you're just sweating and uncomfortable. And it's just like, and it like, I guess someone here is from Arizona, you have dry heat. It's a little more functional. Once it gets out of that, it's able to do things a little bit more easily, a little bit more comfortably. The other way of looking at this symbolically, the planet under the beams is going to just be concealed. We can't see it in the night sky. It's hidden. So it's doing its stuff just fine, but it might be hidden or concealed in doing it. So if Mercury is our voice, if Mercury is our thought, our speech, now it's going to be visible. And so if we've been really restrained, being so temperate for so many weeks, I think it might even, part of this makes me think it might be even harder to do that, because now Mercury is in a position where it is seen and heard much more easily. But what is being seen and heard is more of the Saturnian Capricorn, deliberate, careful energy. So lots of pros and cons in this. I'm excited to see how it turns out. I don't know how all of these how all of these ingredients are going to come together in the recipe. But overall, I am just like very relieved that we'll have Mercury in this space by the time we get this full moon. So let's go to there. This full moon is going to be perfecting. When is it? December 7th in the evening over here in the West. It'll maybe be December 8th if you are more on the Eastern hemisphere. And this is the culmination. A full moon is when the moon is brightest. And so it's the loudest. It's a culmination of everything that's been happening for the last 2 weeks. So we had this really gorgeous Sagittarius new moon. I did a video on that too. If you're interested, you can go check that out. Helping us really start new things, intent in a new way in the Sagittarius part of our chart. It was such an inspirational, hopeful new moon. It was really like kind of just, I feel like throwing our hopes and dreams out into faith, just like taking a trust fall with the universe that, things are going to work out. Sagittarius, right? If we just try, if we just go and take the chance and go gallop off on our mission, it might work out. That's what I felt like about the new moon that was in Sagittarius. And that was on the 23rd of November. Now, 2 weeks later, it's kind of saying, okay, what's the outcome of that? What's the culmination of that? And it's just really an intense energy, because not only is the moon applying to Mars, but Mars is moving backward and applying to the moon. It's a mutual application, which just makes it all the more louder. And this is like new information coming in. If this is a bright moon, it's like shining the light on the Gemini part of our chart, making it really, really visible. So if you want to look at where that is in your chart, I guess, just using myself as an example, I have it in my 5th house of creativity. I'll just make up an example. Maybe, what if I've been writing something? I haven't. What if I've been writing something for the last 2 weeks, and, I'm about to come out with it, and then I get more information, or, maybe I just released whatever that piece of writing was. And then it's running into Mars. I don't know. I don't think I would release a piece of writing on this date, to be perfectly honest. I feel like it's just going to get a bunch of naysayers. So I would just be really careful. Usually full moons are a great time to, share everything that you've been working on. But this one just feels inherently hostile to me. I don't love it. Not every lunation is conducive for constructive outcomes. They just aren't, as much as I think, internet kitchen witch kind of general, let's make moon water on the moon days or whatever. I don't think this is a good day for that. I don't. Jupiter is here squaring all of it. Neptune is here squaring it. So we're getting just a lot of conflict between what we know, what we think we know, what we're hoping for, what we were enthusiastic or hopeful for back on the 23rd of November. And I think it's just, everything's going to be really a lot clearer after the 7th. Yes, the 7th of December, things are going to be illuminated that are going to help maybe confirm, that's why I was being restrained. Oh, that's why it was maybe good that I just waited on that project, or that's why it was good that I waited to commit to that thing. I would like us to all wait until after this full moon happens. If I'm telling people, and that's something I do too much of, I really shouldn't, telling people what they should or shouldn't do. Like, for instance, right now, a good example of that is right now we've got all this really spicy sky weather, but there are also a bunch of protests going on in China. And I'm not going to talk about the politics of that, but if you have something to protest, seems like pretty good weather for it. Really, really loud, really, really kind of, Mars, conflict, war, battle. If you have something to say, particularly something you really believe in, that's really important to you and has a lot of meaning, this is a great time to do a protest. So it really depends on what your goals are that help to decide what to do with certain sky weather. So I don't want to say don't share anything on this full moon, but if you're someone who's like me and you're really sensitive and you're just oh, no one hate anything that I do, everybody love everything that I do, I don't know how good that's going to go with Mars being yeah, but where are your 18 bajillion citations, and be this was an opinion piece. So yeah, I think we should just exercise a little bit of caution. It could be, another thing too. It's how are we embodying the sun? It's what my spirit is calling me toward, what is meaningful to me as a person. And then how am I sharing that with the world? And I think if we're just really thoughtful about our messaging, again, I don't want to say anything about tone policing. I don't like that. But, at the same time, being thoughtful about what is my message? How am I saying it? And does that actually align with how it's being picked up? Intention versus impact. Those are two separate things. They are both important, and one informs the other. And it's kind of intention and impact to me, it's this quality improvement process, this continual quality improvement process where it's okay, well, maybe the impact that it had wasn't what I intended. And so now I'm going to adjust. It might be that happening during this full moon. And it could be something that's super constructive and informative and helpful in us moving forward for the rest of this cycle and deciding, okay, if I want to share this, this is how I'm going to do it. And then it ends up being a hit, So those are my thoughts. But overall, again, Mercury isn't able to see this area, so it's not able to influence it that much. But I do like them having that kind of objective point of view over there. Jupiter can see the sun though. And so Jupiter is able to be a bit of a point of balance here. It's almost like the fulcrum in a teeter-totter. If we're having a hard time balancing, this could just be a culmination of like all of the busyness. Let's say that wherever Sagittarius is in your chart and wherever Gemini is, you've been pulled in those opposite directions. And there's just been a ton of activity here, a ton of activity here, and having a hard time holding space for all of that, having the energy, attention, bandwidth for all of that. Jupiter as a fulcrum for that point, Jupiter is the place of adjustment. So what do I understand about the Pisces part of my chart? And this is the equation that I was using for the rising sign horoscopes. What do I know? What do I really understand now about the Pisces area of my chart that helps me navigate this balancing act that we have between these two? Because when we are able to balance something, it ends up being really, really cool. Like in my mind, like a little vision that just came up in my mind was like one of those mobiles, like those things that hang from a ceiling. And then there's like two things branching out and then two things branching out. And, you put them over like a baby's crib and they're like, oh, wow, so exciting. But there's also like, art museum versions of the same thing. I think that's a really cool example of what happens when we take an opposition. We take two things that are difficult to balance. But if we can manage to do it skillfully, it is so cool. And the results are very interesting and fascinating. So I think this is, a dangerous opportunity. Raghu Marcus is who I heard use that word. And I don't know where he got it, some Buddhist teacher, but yeah, dangerous opportunity. Maybe that could be a phrase for this full moon. There's an opportunity there, but we better be having our little mountain goat hooves on, being like, I'm going to step exactly here, and like, and then maybe it'll work. So I don't think it's all shit, but it's tricky. It's some tricky shit. That's what I'll say about that. Let's check in with that chat. How's it going, everybody? Yes, apply the Mercury arcs protocols for the first, well, probably November 28th, November 29th. That's today. Oh God, have I been doing it today? Uh-oh. Because, it's not like the exact day of, it's always like the few days leading up to it as well, that energy is building and building and building. Oh, okay. Jeff is saying the further south you are, the easier it is to see Mercury as the sun sets. I didn't know that. And maybe that's why I'm always having such a hard time up here. I'm in Wisconsin, and it's just like, yeah, it's never easy to see Mercury. So if you're further south, like definitely go try to check that out in the evening sky. See if you can see Mercury. Hello, Madame Dram. What a cool name. I used to be a pharmacist. I mean, I still have my license, but I like that name. I remember in school, we had to learn all of these like old timey units, like grains and drams and shit. I don't remember what any of it is, but I know a dram is a tiny amount. Oh, happy solar return month. It's almost mine too. I'm also a Capricorn. I almost just made a bleat, but I'm not going to subject you all to that. Okay. So anything else about this moon? Oh, I did write something down here. Oh, emotional volatility in a battle of wills. That makes sense. The moon is maltreated. That's a technical term for when the moon is hitting a malefic contrary to sect in particular, but like, yeah, it's not a great position. That's why I'm like, yeah, maybe just be careful about who you're sharing what with. But from Robert Hand, Planets in Transit, talking about a moon conjunct Mars, sun opposite. This was sun opposite Mars. So Robert Hand, Planets in Transit, sun opposite Mars. He had mentioned watching for ego energies and blind self-assertion. So if you're like, this is what I think, this is what needs to be said, that is your signal to watch out for any blind self-assertion. Just anything where you're charging in. We don't want to be charging in. We want to be carefully tiptoeing up the little goat cliff, right? And then I had also mentioned keeping an agile mind. Be ready to entertain ideas that might piss you off. That's already been the energy. Like if you're on Twitter, there's plenty of people having conversations that we probably shouldn't be having under these skies. But at the same time, that's why we're having them, is because it's under these skies. But I personally have been having to have more of an open mind. I've been having to entertain ideas that I generally didn't want to before. So, and it's okay. Like, I think a lot of us get really identified with our views. That's a really normal human thing. Maybe in some parts of the world, it's less common, but at least where I'm from, people identifying strongly with what they think, what their ideas and opinions are, it's pretty common. It's really difficult to separate yourself from your views, from your ideas. But when we do that, when it's like, I am not my ideas, I am allowed to change my mind. Just because I change my mind doesn't mean that my spirit has changed. Just because I change a view on something and have a flexible mind does not mean that I'm compromising my identity. And I think sometimes that's how we feel. I think I've felt like that quite a bit, where like, for instance, the whole story arc of me being a very, for lack of better words, pretty dogmatic, science-y, materialist person, and then going through the shift into being this astrology woo-woo tarot person, like that I had to really be confronted with the fact that I was identifying very heavily. I felt like to compromise or to change, I would be compromising who I was as a person. And that is a dangerous place to be in my opinion. I don't think it helps the world be a better place, but again, it's a really natural state. So it'll be, I mean, honestly, this full moon and just the weather right now and for the next 2 weeks is going to be a really good time to observe that in all of us and in other people, for sure. Definitely mind your own business on this full moon if you can't keep it anchored, for sure. Let's see. And then I looked at the Deccans as well with this. Yeah, let's bring the Deccans in and then we'll move on. So with this full moon, another thing to consider is just what decan it's in. And a decan is a 10-degree chunk of each sign. We can divvy up the zodiac signs into 10-degree segments that each have their own more detailed symbolism that we can layer on top of everything. So, both of these places really speak to a coming together of disparate parts. In Sagittarius, we've got the horse and the person kind of trying to merge into one. And over in Gemini, this decan is more about holding space for duality, holding space for very different things. From 36 Phases, or Austin Kopic's work on that. I just went to his Norwalk lecture, but the notes that he was telling us, or what he was telling us, I took some notes on it, was in this middle decan of Gemini, there's an image of like a war veteran or something, a really serious, kind of gruff looking individual who was bouncing a child on their knee, really fun, playfully. And it just speaks to that holding space for many ways of being. I contain multitudes, that statement, I contain multitudes. I like to think of Walt Whitman's quote, I contradict myself, so be it, I contradict myself. That is the energy of this middle decan of Gemini. And I think that's what we're going to have to hold on to, is just being like, yep, I maybe can't reconcile this right now. Maybe these different things that are going on inside of me or outside of me are seemingly unreconcilable. That doesn't mean it's going to be like that forever. It doesn't mean that there's something wrong with us because we can't reconcile stuff. And I think that is, we just can't. I don't, it's my personal belief that, there's so much in the world that is just not reconcilable. And that's okay. We don't have to have every little idea and every little thing and every little relationship fit into its perfect little place. That's just not, it's not really that realistic or reasonable. So allowing things to be maybe unreconciled and just waiting for the rest of this lunation to play out, because then we still have 2 weeks left of, okay, what happens after that is illuminated? What happens after all these big feelings? That could be a thing. Okay, now I'm ready to move on. And two, again, If you're getting something out of this, please hit the like button, hit subscribe, schedule a consult. My books are open. Comment if you got personal stuff too that you're comfortable sharing, stories that are coming into mind, share them in the comments too. If you're coming in on this later, listening to the replay. What I like now, after this, we're going to have the moon go into Cancer. And this is a nice breather after what is probably going to be an intense couple days on the 7th, the 6th, 7th, 8th. On the 9th, then the moon is going to be in its home sign of Cancer. And what's really nice about this place in the sky right now is that it is in aversion to both the malefics. So the moon doesn't have to deal with Mars. The moon doesn't have to deal with Saturn. And it can really just chill out. It's going to be opposite Mercury. It's almost like a debriefing. Like a debriefing can happen after anything that was messy. Maybe after like having to show so much restraint in the face of like all of this internal restlessness. It feels like a deep breath. It feels like a very calm and reasonable deep breath. We can take care of ourselves, do any self-care that we need to do, or that of our family, our close friends, our little group with Cancer, and looking at Mercury in the place of more material resources and, how can I take care of myself with what I have in this situation? That feels like a good thing to do on that day and on the 10th as well. What else did I say about this? Yeah. And now we get a little bit more cardinal energy after so much mutability. Now we're going to start really getting into it because Mercury's already gone into cardinal. Venus is moving into Capricorn on this day as well. So we can just go by the hour here. There we go. So by the end of the day, at least in Central Time on the 9th, now we're getting a little bit further and further out of this mutable, changeable, adapting energy. And we're getting more focused onto one track or maybe deciding on, okay, well, what do we actually want to focus on with the resources that we have? In this first decan of Capricorn, we're going to have a lot of action for the rest of the month. This is where the new moon is happening. That's going to be coming up. And this first decan of Capricorn is, and again, this comes from Austin Kopic's work on the Deccans, it's finding the land that you want to settle down on. It's like after Sagittarius and, exploring and going off and being a bit nomadic and, going off into the world, then we in the first part of Capricorn say, let's land here. Let's stop here. Let's build here. This is what we want to build. This is where we want to build. And that's why I'm kind of thinking this is going to be more focused, constructive energy. And it's going to be much clearer about what we want to focus on. It might not be clear before this date. We might still be information hunting, trying to make sense of things. But I feel like after the full moon, by the 9th, at this point, we're going to have enough information. We're going to have enough understanding that we can be like, okay, so now let's invest into this. Let's invest into this person, into this place, into this project, whatever it is. It's not necessarily as faith-based either. The sun is still in Sag, so there's plenty to do with the sun being optimistic. And I really like that. I like that all of this is happening and we still have the sun in Sagittarius to continue to imbue us with hope, with optimism, with inspiration, and kind of those fires to act. But then we've got a couple planets to really bring that down to earth and try to make whatever we're hoping for real. Let's see. Yeah, and then it gets out of that square with Jupiter. And that was another nice thing about this. So, we've got the sun in Sag, like I said, bringing the inspiration, bringing the hope and the faith. And I really like this sextile that now Venus and Mercury have with Jupiter. It's a constructive energy with the sextile. And again, it's more like, okay, what do we understand? And what resources can we invest that align with what we know? Instead of, haphazardly investing in things that don't have any chance of succeeding. Now, after that full moon, it's going to be a lot easier to invest wisely, whatever that means for you, whether that's time, effort, bandwidth, money, space, whatever it is. Now, Saturn is not able to communicate with these planets. That was kind of a little bit of a drawback. Saturn is in its home sign of Aquarius, which is great. And, means we have the resources, we have the abilities to make the most of whatever we're constructing, but it is a little hard for them to communicate. So that was a bit of a challenge. So it might be that, like, it feels like we have the resources. It feels like we should be able to invest, but there still might be a little bit of a disconnect. So, I want to wait till really once Jupiter gets into Aries, that is going to be go time. That's going to be mega go time. And that's coming up real soon. But at least now we're going to start to get a more realistic view about what can be done about whatever things are going on in our life. So the 9th and the 10th, that very constructive energy. Then on the 11th, we're going to get a nice sun sextile to Saturn. And that is, I feel like that's a nice integration point. I feel like that's a word that's being overused already, integration, but what does that mean? It's to me, integration is when we take a bunch of knowledge, skills, understanding, maybe things we've been collecting, and we can put them to use. We can actually say, okay, this is where that goes, and this is where those skills can be used. And, now that I understand this is where that understanding makes sense. So after the dust has settled, there's an opportunity to incorporate everything we've learned, decided, and we can incorporate that into the systems of our Aquarius parts of our chart. So look to whatever house Aquarius is in. And now it's time to take that step further in, like, building and constructing those systems in Aquarius. So I think that'll be a nice couple days. Like, after all of the restlessness of that full moon, like, the following few days are actually pretty constructive to me. And then on the 12th, so hold on, I got a checklist. I got an actual checklist of things to talk about. Look at that. I'm so organized. Oh, we talked about that. Oh, we talked about that. Oh, we didn't talk about Venus's phasis. That's coming up too. Mercury is going to reach its shadow degree. So Mercury is going to have a retrograde at the very end of December in Capricorn. And on the 12th, it's going to reach its pre-shadow, pre-retrograde shadow at 8. I'm going to move it back. Let's be super perfectionisty about it. So here, Mercury's at 8 degrees of Capricorn. And now we have officially entered into another Mercury retrograde story time. The pre-retrograde shadow is a time where Mercury reaches the degree where it's going to come back to, and eventually Mercury will station direct here in January. This is a time to just start watching the Capricorn area of your chart. Start watching there and see what's going on, what changes might need to be made there, what adjustments might need to be made with Mercury and Capricorn. So how am I distributing my resources? What am I building? Who am I talking about it with? With a Mercury retrograde coming up here, if you do have, like I had mentioned, okay, we're understanding stuff, we're choosing what to work on, what to invest on. I personally am not going to be sharing those projects out loud before I know that they're going to be a thing. So, if you have something that's really important to you and you're really excited about it, they might change. There might be adjustments. There might be shifts that are going to happen. So I wouldn't be like spouting it from the rooftops that, oh, this is definitely going to be the outcome of this investment of time or energy or whatever, because it's not the end of the Mercury retrograde story that's happening here. So it is a bit of a wrench in our plans potentially. But at the same time, I don't feel like Mercury retrogrades are inherently like a wrench in things. They are a very natural part of life, and they happen 3 times a year. And I mean, does anything ever really go as planned? Maybe sometimes it does, but I mean, I think it's just a natural function of life that when we set out to do stuff, many times we have to make shifts and adjustments halfway through to reach completion. You know, it's if I'm making something in the kitchen and I forgot an ingredient and I had to go run to the store, that happens. It's not inherently bad, but that kind of stuff does happen. So again, on the 12th of December, we're going to want to start watching those Capricorn areas of our chart. And this is also a time when Mercury is going to start its slowing down process. It's just going to lose speed gradually. So, you know, we're going to want to say stuff. I mean, Mercury is now visible. We're going to want to share our plans. And usually I'd be like, yeah, Mercury's visible, say it, you know, but knowing that there's a retrograde coming, just leave it a little open-ended. So like, okay, say stuff, but leave it open-ended. Just understand that there might be some shifts. If you're working with someone on something, you know, Venus is here making it more relational, also making it like really creative and cute, but relational. If there are other people involved, making sure that they know it's open-ended too. Making sure that they know that, okay, we might have to adjust some things here depending on how it goes. And that if we know what to expect, it's so much easier down the road, right? So just keep that in mind with whatever plans are happening. The moon in Leo that day as well. So kind of opposite to what I was saying with the moon in Cancer, not having to deal with Saturn. Now we're dealing directly with Saturn. And these are always days where I say, you know, give yourself extra time to commute on the 12th, on the 13th. Is that right? Yeah. Maybe more on the 11th of December, the 12th of December. Give yourself extra time to commute. Saturn always slows us down, you know. We might really be wanting to express ourselves on the 12th and the 13th. And it's actually like, I really like this. Whenever the moon, you know, we've got this fire trine here. So this is really generative and fun and bubbly and boisterous, as long as we're, again, keeping it on the rails, giving ourselves some extra time to commute. Because this looks really fun. Like the moon in Leo and the sun in Sag, this just looks like a good time to me. A good time to like be playful, get engaged, have those conversations about, you know, things you're excited about. But Saturn is going to be like, yeah, within limit though, within reason. So it does kind of put a little bit of a damper on things being opposite Saturn. And then this is where, so I wanted to give us all a heads up that by the 13th of December, this is our last week of Jupiter in Pisces. So this is the last week we have to squeeze the juice out of Pisces. Pisces, Jupiter isn't necessarily a lottery ticket, is how I say it. It's not necessarily material growth because it's a water sign that's like very spiritual and immaterial and, you know, ineffable. Like there aren't words for what Pisces is all the time. But it's opportunities for that internal understanding, opportunities for just understanding the wider picture of things. With Neptune being here, even more so, like that opportunity for forgiveness, opportunity for acceptance. So if there was a kerfuffle, if there was like dust that had to be settled, I think on the 13th, it actually might be a good day once moon gets away from Saturn, away. It is at this point, you know, I guess later in the day on the 13th. It could be a good time to have a talk with someone to smooth things over if you need to, or to smooth things over with yourself and just be really kind to yourself. Be like, it's okay that you got that wrong, or it's okay that that didn't turn out the way that you intended. You know, we're going to do better next time, but, you know, also just acceptance and forgiveness, because that's something that Pisces does really, really well. And Jupiter is here to help us do it. I mean, if it is material growth, material expansion, again, this is your last week, because on December 20th, that's when Jupiter gets out of Pisces. Yeah, I think that was all I wanted to say about that. Squeeze the juice. Squeeze that juice. Understanding, opportunity, expansion. Oh yeah, dreaming and visioning as well. It's kind of our last week to like really like use our expansive imagination. Great for art, this whole time with Jupiter in Pisces, and currently with Venus, and even even December too. I don't think we think about Venus in Capricorn as like super erotic or anything, because Saturn is not erotic. Saturn is like not into, sexy time or making art or stuff like that. But I think that's an overly dry perspective on Capricorn. Capricorn is a goat fish. Jason Holley, talks about the antelope of the deep waters with Capricorn. P.S. If you haven't heard of Jason Holley, or if you have, go find, I should link it below. The Capricorn lecture, like, changed my life. I'm a Capricorn, but it brings so much humanity and water back into Capricorn. So Venus in Capricorn sextile Jupiter, this is a time for art. This is a time for creation, for there's a lot of fertility happening. Like, depending on what kind of chart you have, maybe be careful that you don't accidentally make babies if you don't want to make babies. But it just seems like a really good time to just, again, with that last week of Jupiter in Pisces, vision, dream, think, be inspired, think about the best possible case. We're so used to thinking about the worst possible case all the time. And no matter if we use our imagination to imagine the worst case, use our imagination to imagine the best case, neither of those things are real, because neither of them have happened yet. We're timeline hopping. We're going to the future and we're having apprehension about it. So I like to encourage people to do the positive version of that too. If we're, I mean, ideally, if I'm thinking in my Buddhist type of mind, I'm not doing either. I'm being here, and not to say we don't need to plan. We do live in the material world. I am a layperson. I need to plan stuff and pay my taxes and stuff. But this timeline hopping of always being in the past, always being in the future, kind of takes us away from the present, honestly. But if we're going to do it, if we're going to be normal human beings and do that timeline jumping that we just naturally like to do, because that's how our brains were evolved to work. Otherwise, we'd probably die. Think about the best possible scenario as well as the worst one. If your brain always goes to the worst one, make it also think of a good one, even if it feels silly or foolish or whatever. It's our last week to do that with ease. It's really easy to do that compared to usual sky weather. So that was the other way to squeeze the juice, so to speak. Let's check in with that chat check. Yeah. Okay. So Breezeke's breaking the very overly skeptical and sciencey and unwilling to budge for no. Yeah. With the mental rigidity. Yes. It's so difficult. I learned from Joseph Goldstein in his book, Mindfulness. He says it's just as easy to be attached to disbeliefs as it is to be attached to beliefs. And I was like, how dare you? How dare you? Yeah, I'm excited for Venus to be visible. Thank you for reminding me. Yeah, Venus is coming into her visibility as well. So that's always a really spectacular thing. It's always nice to see that bright, sparkling star in the sky. Oh, and then can you elaborate on the pre and post retrograde shadow in calculating it? Yeah, we'll go back to that. That's a good question. Me. Okay. Yeah, let's look at that. So how to tell the Mercury retrograde, post, and pre-shadow. So again, I'll just animate the chart here by the week. So here is where, this is on January 18th. I should have said this. Thanks for bringing us back here. So at the end of December, which we haven't got to, oh, that's why I haven't said it, because we're not there yet. Mercury is going to station retrograde at the end of December, and is going to be stationing direct on January 18th. Now look at the degree where Mercury stations direct on January 18th. It's at 8 degrees of Capricorn. So we can see that. So if we go back to when it stationed, if we go back to just when Mercury was originally moving over that point in the first place. has not stationed backwards yet, has not stationed retrograde. On December 12th, Mercury is going to move over this place that it's going to later revisit. So there's something about this degree that speaks to this story. So it's almost like a little foreshadowing, a little preview potentially. So that's one way of looking at it. It's also just the beginning of this story, the beginning of this Mercury retrograde story that we're going to watch for the next, several weeks. So when it reaches that place where it will eventually station direct later, and it'll say, okay, time to go forward again. That is how you find that degree. Now, conversely, if we want to look at the post-retrograde shadow, so there's a shadow at the beginning and there's a shadow at the end. If we want to do that, I think it's at 24. Yeah, it's at 24. So at 24 degrees of Capricorn, right here, this is where it's going to station retrograde. And so this is the degree that Mercury will eventually reach once it's stationed direct, it's gone forward, and this will be like in February, I believe. At that point, it'll have left its shadow and it'll be all done. So yeah, then on February 6th, Mercury will be at the degree where it had stationed retrograde previously. And now this is like it has put its footprints on the last part of that trek. And once it moves beyond it, I think we can say that the whole Mercury retrograde story is going to be in the rear view mirror after it gets past that degree of the post-retrograde shadow. So that's the degree-based way of looking at it. Another thing to consider is speed. Because this whole time that Mercury is, it reaches 8 degrees, this whole march that it has to 24 degrees, it's starting to slow down. And when a planet is moving slower, that reflects how it's acting, how it's kind of reflecting down here. So if Mercury is slowing down, maybe our thoughts and our communications and our thinking is slowing down. If Mercury is going really fast, maybe all of our communications are happening really fast and our thoughts are happening really fast. So that kind of as above, so below, as above business, we can even see that in planetary speed. So hopefully that clarifies all of that. I know it's kind of a lot. Oh, hi, Joji. Welcome. We have so many Capricorns here. Ah, so nice. Welcome. Yay. Oh my gosh. Good. Yeah, I'm glad, and there's other, I've heard other astrologers have other symbolic narratives that they kind of put on top of that 3-part thing. But this also helps to explain, because sometimes with a Mercury retrograde or any planetary retrograde, we'll start to see and feel it before it exactly stations. And it's because that speed is lessening or speeding up. And similarly, after the retrograde is over, that doesn't mean just because that planet has stationed and started to go direct, that does not mean that everything's resolved and all the confusion might have been cleared up. It takes time for that planet to speed up again and then reach its post-shadow degree to really be okay, wow, that whole story is done. Yeah, so good. Glad I could help. All right. And then did we talk about Venus emerging? That's coming up. Okay. So on the 14th, 15th, 16th of December, those felt like good days to get shit done. And I say that because we've got Moon in very practical, earthly, material-oriented Virgo. It's a flexible earth sign, so it is able to be very pragmatic in how it's working on things. It's got this really nice earth trine set up. We've got a couple personal visible planets here helping us out in Capricorn, helping us figure out what resources we want to use for what we want to invest in. We've got some novelty, some ability to innovate with Uranus being involved. And then the Moon bringing it down to the practical, tiny steps that we need to take. So I love this energy. It just feels very constructive, productive, innovative, where we can think about trying new ways of achieving whatever we are setting out to achieve. It is kind of intense. The Moon is being seen by a lot of planets by aspect. All of these planets can see the Moon. I think everyone but Saturn, pretty much. So when the moon is in Virgo for these couple days, I think it's going to be kind of like busy and just, yeah, a lot going on, a lot to consider. But yeah, the 14th, 15th, 16th of December felt like good days to get stuff done, if you will. And like Virgo is very much the daily process. It is, all the little things that are kind of mundane, maybe not super exciting, but we have to do them if we want to make our dreams over in Pisces come true. Like, it's just the way that it works. Then on the 16th, we do end up getting moon moving into Libra. And then we get this air trine. And I actually really like this too. I've been enjoying this. Because again, Saturn brings structure and form to wherever it is. I know Mars is retrograde. It's not totally reliable in terms of vitality, but we do have some vitality and some oomph with Mars here, maybe a mental oomph. And then the moon bringing it into a nice trine. So these mental, intellectual, cognitive energies on the 16th and the 17th. So if we've got a lot of mental things to sort out, some problem solving in the mind to do, if we need to navigate some relational things, Libra moon, very relational. It's kind of a good day to do that on the 16th. I think Venus's day is on Friday, so that'll be helpful for us. And then on the 17th, oh yeah, and 2 on the 16th, like air stuff, not just thinking, but writing, communicating, speaking, planning, all of those cognitive things are very, very, should flow a little bit easier on the 16th. Then on the 17th, we get our evening star Venus, finally, after so long. I think, what is it? Is it the 40 days, 40 nights that she spends away? We get 15 degrees, our convention. Might be a little early, might be a little later, depending on your environment. So in the evening sky after sunset, we should start to be able to see now over the next several weeks, Venus is going to march higher and higher and higher into the sky. And I used to take this drive. After work, my shift would get done. Then I'd have to drive home an hour at a really long commute. And there are longer commutes, but it was like super flat. It was a very flat drive. And I had the most beautiful view of Venus at sunset pretty much every day of the week for like 2 years. And I would just watch every time this would happen with Venus in the evening sky. Like when the sun sets, how there's that color gradient of like, red, orange, green, blue, whatever. And like Venus climbing through those colors, I could tell how much progress she was making by which color of the sunset she had reached or made it to. And I always just thought that was so beautiful. So hopefully you can notice that too. And now, what is this when Venus becomes visible? Maybe relational stuff, maybe relationships that we are in have been kind of quiet. Maybe there just hasn't been as much going on. Maybe we've been, whether it's just because of busyness or, whatever the reason, maybe we just haven't been able to connect as easily with people. And now with Venus visible, maybe that connection is a little easier. Maybe our Venusian principles of like knowing what our values are, considering our values while she's been under the beams. Maybe it's been more of an internal, it's another way of considering an invisible planet or a planet we can't see, is that it might be kind of an internal process that's happening, an internal recalibration of values. What do I value? What's important to me about this? And then once Venus goes into visibility, we're being more embodied in what we value. If we did change our mind about something that we value, what we're going to put our time, effort, material resources into, now we're actually going to really embody that. So like the example that came to mind was maybe we've been wanting to put some wallpaper on the walls, and we've been, Venus is under the beams, considering different wallpapers and being like, am I still a pattern person? Or do I want this other type of pattern, or maybe a solid kind of situation? And P.S., I hate wallpaper for the most part, but there are some really cool ones out there, I gotta say. Who knew? I had no idea. And then once Venus becomes visible, it's like, okay, we're choosing the wallpaper, we're buying it, and we're putting it up. Like, here it is here, and it is fantastic. So that was an example. And then too, just with that trine, that Earth trine with Uranus, again, don't be, or sorry, no, is that? Hold on. Yes, it is. My brain. It might be time to try something new, you know? Whatever we value now, it might be a new value. It might be something that we've never really considered we valued, but we're like, oh, I actually do really like that, or I actually do really care about that. And so it might feel uncomfortable. It might be a new thing for us. It might be a little out of our comfort zone to embody valuing what we now value and being maybe public, being more open about it. But that could be a thing. So yeah. And just more outwardly expressive in our partnerships or in our relationships as well. On the 19th, we get Moon conjunct South Node for the day. I always just like to take it easy. Anytime the moon or the sun meet the South Node, whether it's just by transit like this, or whether the South Node is transiting over your personal moon, your personal sun, I just like to take it more easy during those times. The South Node is more of a point, depending on what tradition you're using or how you're going about that. It can be a point of, lessening less. The moon and the sun are part of our vitality combination, so we might be feeling a little less vital. We might be like just tired. It can also just be more of a focus on less material world things, less material world pursuits, and more like spiritual, internal, quieter types of pursuits. So, yeah, it's a good time to take her easy. Actually, I was gonna tell this story on Twitter, but I'll just tell it here. And this is not like a nature flex or something like I'm a robust northerner who can be cold. Like that's not what this is about. But I noticed last Tuesday we had this. It was this, but it was at 13 degrees. We had moon on South Node, and in Scorpio. The moon already struggles a little bit in Scorpio to have its needs met, to feel like safe and comfortable and nourished and things like that. So there's like a tired energy with the moon in the South Node. And last Tuesday, it was about 40 degrees here. So kind of cold, not too bad. It was sunny out and I was really bundled up. I went on my daily walk. I always go on my walk and I was at the shore. And a lot of times I'll sit on these big rocks on the shore. And I was just like really tired. And it was very sunny and I was so bundled up and I was very like, I was doing all right. It wasn't that cold. And I found these rocks that kind of made like a recliner situation. And I like reclined and I legit fell asleep outside in like 40-degree temperature on rocks. And I was like, this probably is a South Node moon Scorpio thing, like not very comfortable, but somehow comfortable all of a sudden. I found comfort in a very uncomfortable, inhospitable situation, very moon Scorpio. And then just the South Node, like the tiredness of it. I dozed. It was a very quick snooze. I like woke up pretty quickly. And then another Scorpio symbolism that was in that moment was I woke up and I was like, the first thing I fearfully remembered was this spider that was this big, PS, that I had seen there 2 months earlier, like on the rock next door, like right in the same spot. And I was like, fuck, that spider is here. That spider lives here. It might be awake. It might still be here. Scorpio being a place of arachnids, I was like, oh my God. So safe to say I was not comfortable falling asleep again with the spider in my brain. So yeah, that was that very symbolic. Take her easy. Another thing about this day on the 19th is that the moon, this whole business is trine Jupiter and Neptune. So again, I was mentioning with Jupiter and Neptune here, a lot of introspection of understanding the internal world, acceptance, forgiveness, those types of things. It might be a nice day for contemplation. I really like this for just like internally contemplating emotions, sensations, our physical experience of the world, our sensing experience of the world, anything like that, where we're contemplating our inner world feels like a much better use of our day there, if you are able to. And here we go on the 20th. We've got Jupiter making its ingress again into Aries. So this is, if you remember, do I remember when this was at like, I think it was Halloween-ish when Jupiter had gone back into Pisces. So we didn't have them for too long in Pisces, but now Jupiter is coming back into this sextile with Mars. So this is spicy and fiery and inspired and fun, and just like, it's a lot of energy, and I'm excited for it. I feel like I personally got a lot of writing done during this time, a lot of the just, with Gemini being thinking, writing, speaking, listening, and then getting this injection of growth, expansion, opportunity. And it is in this nice harmonious sextile. So that's going to be fun. And that is going to be the case until May 16th. So we've got a really good, I don't know, almost 5, is it a little more than 5, almost 6 months of having Jupiter back in Aries to bring growth, expansion, opportunity into that Aries part of your chart. So that's going to be happening. And what else was really interesting about this is now we're getting a square between the Capricorn planets. Sun is about to join them, and Jupiter. So all of these Capricorn planets, and especially with this new moon that's coming up, we're going to be like, really now, what do we want to build here? What is the long-term plan? Capricorn is a long game person, long-term things, delayed gratification, waiting. And it is sending all of that energy of long-term plan into this space of cardinal starting, the energy to begin, and just a lot of enthusiasm with Aries and Jupiter being here. So I love that combination. It is that kind of peak cardinal energy. Aries is really good at starting things. It's not necessarily good at finishing them. Aries is very good at helping other people start things, but it's not full of stamina and endurance the way that Scorpio is. Scorpios are more of our, it can hold on to that energy because it's a fixed sign. Aries energy kind of is a flash and it piddles out. But in conjunction with all of this Capricorn cardinality, we're starting something, but we're starting a big ass long project. Like, I like the meeting of these two things, and I don't care if it's a square, that's fine. I like these energies together very, very much. But I'll speak more about that with the new moon. So we're reigniting that sextile with Mars. I feel like the dreams, and that's why I was talking about before with Jupiter in Pisces, we're using our imagination, we're using our visioning potential to be like, okay, what can happen here? What's the best case scenario? What do I dream? What would be like the dream scenario? And now the Capricorn planets are like, yes, I see your dream and I raise you these limits of reality. But it creates this really realistic container to build off of based on what our dreams were. And now that Jupiter is in Aries, it's like, okay, now we're actionable, fire, action. We're actually doing stuff based on this. So I think this whole time from now, December 20th until May 16th, it will be a time to actually put our actions where our thoughts and words have been. What did I say? Yeah. Yep. And this is just such a beautiful setup. So this entry of Jupiter into Aries is a really great setup in my mind to the new moon that's about to happen in Capricorn. So let's go to the next day. And hallelujah, look at that. Happy Capricorn season, the season of the goatfish. We can be in water. We can be in earth. We are very fertile. We are the fertile plains and marshes of the Nile Delta. There's so much. I know we think about winter, but I am very much a fan of thinking about Capricorn as and I think this comes from Robert Hand. I think this is where I heard this first. It's kind of like how, things are born in Cancer. We think more about things dying in Capricorn, but I like to think of Capricorn as we're not dead. We're in hibernation. Yeah, there's been a lot of loss. I'm a tree. I've lost all my leaves. I'm just a bunch of bark, but I'm still alive, and it's this hibernation point. And I think in the natural cycle of things, it's good to rest. It's good to just be quiet for a minute and just be bark, and have things stripped away. And then it's like that kinetic energy that has not acted yet. And it's that seed that can then, when the spring happens, really blossom into something. So this is very potent, fertile energy to me, but it is like nascent and quiet. And it's like a hibernating seed, but there's still like a ton of life in there. So that's how I feel about Capricorn season. Wow. So excited for all of us. We've got this balsamic moon in Sagittarius. This might be a good time to really make sense of this whole last crazy lunation. It'll be having a nice trine with Jupiter, and now Jupiter is away from Neptune. So all of that, just not knowing what's real, not knowing what is correct, not knowing if I'm correct or wrong about whatever, we're really away from that now. Jupiter has had the water burned off of it in Aries. It's got a really clear understanding about what's going on. And the moon can help make sense of all that. Like, what in the hell was that whole last month about? That'll be a good thing to do on the 21st. We got, not only this ingress into Capricorn with the sun, but yeah, the moon has some thinking to do in Sagittarius and making in Sagittarius that overarching meaning of everything. And that'll set us up for a very cute new moon in Capricorn. And man, what a time to seed something. I love this. We're not bothered by Mars anymore. We've got this nice square here with a nice square. We've got a square with Jupiter. And yeah, it's kind of everything I've been saying, like investing, deciding what we're going to invest in, investing in that, whether that be time, resources, effort, labor, whatever it is, knowing where we want to. Again, that first decan of Capricorn, where do we want to plant these seeds, or where should this nascent life actually sprout later on in the cycle? This is a great time. Like if you do have a longer term project that you want to intend upon, and it's not probably going to even be done in this whole lunation cycle. Maybe on the full moon, you'll reach some kind of milestone, but Capricorn does things over a very long period of time. So this is just a fantastic time I think, to be creating something new that you're going to be putting a lot of effort in over a long period of time that creates the situation of delayed gratification. And we can put structure and form in a container around all of those dreams that we've been having all month, even in November as well. So I know that we don't have Saturn again able to have its eyes on this place. But I mean, maybe this is a reluctant conjunction situation where both of these places are ruled by Saturn. So, I feel like there is somewhat of a connection where it's like, yeah, we do have the resources. We do have the system in place now to make this stuff happen. The Aquarius systems that have been being retooled since January of 2021. Like we've all been doing an overhaul of the Aquarian parts of our chart. It's been, not a short story there, but I think those systems at this point are really starting to come online and be like, yeah, like this all makes sense around me now. I feel like all of these things actually fit into the systems of my life now, based on all the changes that we've made basically over like the last 2 years. So, big new moon, really, really like it. Was there anything? Yeah, I said a very can-do attitude. Yeah, and it's just not in configuration with either malefic. Like that was, again, I'd like Saturn to be able to kind of have an overview of Capricorn, but at the same time, it's just kind of nice to have them all have a break from any of that malefic kind of extreme energy, extreme hot, extreme cold. We've got some real nice conditions for growth in Capricorn here. Let me check in with this chat. Any questions, any concerns? Yeah, Kyra brings up a really good point too. The Gregorian calendar, looking at the new moon, this new moon coming at the end of the year. And I think we all really like to intent on things that are bigger and have a wider perspective when we're entering into a new year. I just recently did a horoscope for Aquarians for 2023. And, one thing I was looking at with just the overall weather for the year is that a lot of the configurations and things, like for instance, Saturn continuing to be in Aquarius, Mars continuing to be in Gemini, that stays for until March. So, as much as I agree, Kyra, like, I think this is a fantastic time to be like, yeah, what am I going to do for like this whole next year? I think the first like few months of 2023 are probably not going to feel like super new and bright and shiny. I think the first couple months of 2023 are going to feel kind of like same old, kind of the same slog that we've been going through at the end of 2022. But also, like, once March does come around, it's going to be a whole new ball game. It's like all the pieces on the chessboard are getting rearranged once March happens. So yes, make your bigger intentions for the whole next year on this new moon in Capricorn, knowing that like the first couple months of 2023 are going to be kind of slow. It's going to be slow going, I think, until we get that all those big shifts, Pluto too, kind of dipping into Aquarius for a few months. Da-da. Anything else interesting here? I'm looking at the end of the month. We got Mercury sextile Neptune. That's kind of a creative, flexible energy. Mercury in Capricorn is so, it's declarative. It's like, this is what's real. And then I'll just say what I need to say based on the facts. It's not adding in any interpretation. It's not adding in feelings. It's not adding in any of that. But this is kind of nice in that it gets a bit of an influence of some of that faith, some of that less real world, more imaginal space. I think my only caveat for this would just be like this period of time, this last week of December is in this last decan of Pisces, we get really devoted to things, sometimes even overly devoted to things. So just, again, be clear about what you're devoting yourself to and make sure that you're not devoting yourself to anyone, any interest, any project that doesn't have your best interests in mind. Maybe that's a good segue to talk about Pluto's involvement here, as Mercury is going to be stationing retrograde. I think that's the last. Yeah, this is pretty much the last chunk of stuff here. Mercury's retrograde and all of those planets dealing with Pluto. So as we move along away from this new moon, Mercury reaches its station degree on the 27th. So it's going to be at 24 and it's pretty much not moving at this point. It's facing Pluto. So, in general, I like to think about Capricorn in terms of the material world, whether or not we like it. It's that whole, this is how we've always done it, so we're going to keep doing it this way. And at best, that I think are beautiful traditions, family traditions, cultural traditions, things of that our ancestors were doing that were really, really cool and useful that we still do today. I make my pie crusts from lard. We're doing it that way because there's a reason. It's not necessarily always, oh, we're going to do it this way because that's how we've always done it. Sometimes there's a damn good reason why we do it. If I'm using lard for my pie crust, it's much more forgiving. It's much more of a stretchy pie crust. It's not going to break. And I'm going to swear a lot less as I'm rolling it out and trying to transfer it to my pie plate. At worst in Capricorn, we can get this over rigidity of Saturn and not recognizing, like we do in Aquarius, that, oh, well, there are things that we could change. There are obsolete things of this that could use an upgrade. And it doesn't mean we throw out the whole system or the whole structure, babies in bathwater. That's more of an Aquarius thing, though, of optimizing. But we can get a little stuck and rigid in Capricorn sometimes. It is Earth. And I think one of the things that might come up here with Pluto too being power dynamics, the structures that be, and the power that they have. In 2008, Pluto entered into Capricorn, and we had all these economic fallouts, particularly in America, these companies that were too big to fail. Anything that gets too big to fail, that's probably Pluto territory. And what happens in those situations? We get corruption. we get distortion, I think about Pluto being mutation, distortion. It's like when you hold up a wine glass and you look through the bottom of it, how it just, the light gets distorted through that glass. That's very Plutonian to me. And that's kind of what Mercury's coming up against. It's like, oh, well, I just had all these really neat intentions that Claire told me to be excited about. And now I'm running into the powers that be, the structures that be, the limitations of whatever this is. And how do I navigate around them? How do I navigate through them or with them, manage it? It could also just be like where we're distributing resources. If we want to talk about that third decan of Capricorn, one of the images that Austin Coppock talked about was, like a banker behind a desk, with the money being like, well, who gets this and who gets that? That could be a thing. And just having to decide like, okay, well, there are limits here. So where do I wisely, strategically invest into certain things? And communicate about that. How do I communicate about that as well? So we get then on the 29th. So this retrograde period, December 29th is when it starts. January 18th is when it's going to station direct later on. So it's a 3-week period of time about. And what's so interesting about this is not the first one of these we've had. I'm trying to remember. I think it was in Gemini, like a year ago, 2 years ago, we had a Mercury retrograde that was conjunct Venus over in Gemini, I think. But this really just adds a relational element to it. This is involving, it might, depending on your situation, it might be involving other people. Venus can also just be values, just more abstractly. Like, okay, like I see all these limitations. I see the structure of things and how that's going to affect the navigation, the distribution, the management of my resources. But I value this though, or like, this doesn't align with my values. Venus is ethics. It is, it's what we prefer even. And our preferences are something, I prefer the lime popsicles over the strawberry popsicles, like I can't really change that. That's just inherent to us. I can get backup from my therapist on that. Preferences, we don't usually choose them. We don't usually control them. And so it could be our preferences are butting up against the structures that be. So values, preferences, people, this could have to do with vices, maybe there's something in my life that has too much of a hold on me. Maybe it's a food, maybe it's a substance, maybe it's a relationship. It could be so many things. Like I believe anything can become an addiction. Twitter, so looking at those things that maybe we're overvaluing to our detriment, that could be a thing. And the sun is here just like seeing all of it and bringing visibility to all of it, shining light on all of it. So keep that in mind. And then again, look at what house Capricorn is in. So in this, if we just use this Sagittarius rising chart, the second house would be money, like really a lot of, the very plain example, maybe this person would be overvaluing money. Maybe they have enough and they're just being greedy, or stingy, or maybe, they're not putting themselves first. Maybe for whatever reason, they're used to, maybe just putting their romantic interests first, or their pleasurable interests first, or more reasonably, your children first. That makes a lot of sense. But does that leave your cup empty? So there's always two sides of everything. And, we can end up in one ditch or the other on either side of the road. So those could be things, but it's definitely, this is funky. It's kind of funky. Anytime Pluto is involved, I'm just like, okay, there's going to be shenanigans. There could be cover-ups. There could be corruption. Those are a little bit more corrosive type Pluto dynamics, power dynamics. So we're going to have to navigate something here. And it could just be, again, as mundane as I'm on Twitter too much and whatever. And it could be more serious. So it really depends. It depends on the rest of your timing, what annual profection year you're in, what your birth chart is like. So I don't mean to fearmonger, but yeah, it looks kind of like shenanigans. And then what's interesting too is then Venus leapfrogs over Mercury. So, Mercury's been leading this whole dance. Mercury and Venus have been together through most of Sagittarius into Capricorn. And through most of that, Mercury has been leading the path. And to me, that symbolically means our rational mind has been leading this whole time, saying, yeah, you might feel that way. Yeah, you might like that. That might be a preference, but here's the rationality to it. Here's what's reasonable. Now Venus is breaking away from that, and they're just going to keep getting distance between each other. So, whatever we do prefer, whatever we do value, I think it's going to be much clearer as well as our rational mind starts to reconsider a bunch of things. And then, of course, we get a conjunction between Venus and Pluto here. And this is December 31st. This is New Year's Eve. When is it exactly? Yeah, it's that night or that day into that night. So, Venus and Pluto get together, and it's intensity. That's another thing Pluto does, is it is intense. It's kind of it can be a little obsessive. It's like that just like clinginess, we just like grasp really, really tightly to stuff. And, I guess going backward, I could say with Mercury being faced with Pluto, it could just be that whatever we're thinking about, we're just thinking about it too much. We're just like really hyper fixating on it, really hyper focusing on it. And the answer might just be to think about something else for once, or just do something else just to get your mind off of it for a time. But then we get Venus here, and now that kind of grasping, that clinginess might be more relational. It might be toward our vices or what we prefer. And yeah, just that intensity. Pluto can just be really extreme and bring it to the nth degree. So just be aware of yourself. I think, again, this is a normal thing that happens to people, at least some of us, where, we get a little too deep into something. We're clinging to something. We're not wanting to let go, Pluto as impermanence, Pluto as letting go of that grasping, of that clinging. That can be a super enlightening experience. I'm speaking Buddhist things now. We have the teachings of the Buddha about, with great suffering, we can also have great enlightenment, or great, I should say, a great opportunity for that. So it's not necessarily a bad thing, but we have to have our wits about us and kind of be observing our mind, observing our heart, observing what we feel like we're maybe overly clinging to, and then purposely not getting judgmental of ourselves, because that's really easy. That meta feeling of, oh, we see something, we observe something, and we're like, oh no, my brain is bad. It's doing bad things. We don't want to do that, because that's a downward spiral. But we observe, and we try not to judge, and we say, I see you, mind, you're doing it again. Haha. And then, 30 seconds later, your mind is back on it, and you're like, haha, I see you again. And, it's that awareness. It's that sense that, oh, I can see it. I see what's going on. I have my eye on it. That's it. That's enough. So we don't have to beat anything. We don't have to beat any monsters. We don't have to, have any big successes on this day with Pluto, but yeah, just being really super duper aware. And then Mercury is going to have, as we get into January, Mercury will have its whole retrograde situation. It's going to have its cazimi. So lots to talk about in January. Let me make sure I didn't miss anything. If anyone's got anything in the chat that they wanted to talk about that we didn't get to, let me know now, or forever hold your peace. Oh, and then Mercury leaves its shadow again. That was February 7th. So December 29th, it's going to station retrograde. January 18th, it'll station direct. And then February 7th, we'll be able to dust our hands of all of it. Hopefully, maybe. Is there anything I missed? I don't think so. So let's see the chat if anyone has any other things. Yeah, Kyra is also mentioning just that all those shifts in March. Yeah, that'll be very, very nice. Joji says Venus and Pluto conjunct on their birthday. Better get 2 cakes. Yeah. You're going to need, this is an intense party. This is a party extreme, XTREME. I personally, mine is not far off from this. I'm just going to talk about myself for a minute. My last solar return, if I didn't believe in solar returns, now I do. Thanks, Joe. I appreciate that. Thanks for coming. I had Venus retrograde and Mercury with Pluto. And now this year in my solar return, which is on the 25th, it's on Christmas. My birthday's on the 26th. It's Mercury retrograde, Venus direct with Pluto. So I'm like, come on, that's so rude. Like, I already had to deal with this bullshit last year. And now this year I have to deal with the same bullshit that's only slightly different. But I guess, to be honest, if I had to deal with, like, I don't know which is worse, like, to deal with Venus retrograde with Pluto or Mercury retrograde with Pluto. I don't know. They're both not great. Oh yeah, you know what? Yeah, Libra rising. Yeah, I think I got to look at if I was talking to a client, I would look at which houses are ruled by which, So what are the Venus houses versus what are the Mercury ruled places? Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. Yeah, wow is right. So, but you know what? We made it through this year, so we're going to make it through next year too, right? How bad can it be? We've already done it once. We're going to do it again. Well, thank you so much, everybody. This was really fun. Thanks for all the great comments. If you're listening to this later, put your comment down below if you've got something you want to share. I love reading those. Those are so much fun. Also, if you catch an error, love to see those too. Hit the subscribe, hit the like button, hit all the buttons. I'm a professional consulting astrologer. So my books are open. Schedule a reading. If you haven't signed up for my newsletter already, I also have a newsletter. I'll link that down below. If you sign up for it, I send out usually one a month, and there's usually discount codes. I'm usually throwing out discount codes for something, so that'll help save money. I also have a sliding scale. If you're someone who needs a reading, who is looking for that kind of astrological guidance, and funds are tight, or you're someone who is marginalized in this world, I have it all on my website in the FAQ. But just email me, aligninglight@gmail.com, and we can set up something through my sliding scale. It's quite a bit cheaper. And I'm doing research. That was the other thing I wanted to mention. I've gotten a few people. Thank you for all the people who are helping me. I am trying to get a bunch of examples for this technique called the moon under the bonds. It comes from Rhetorius and Paulus, but also Ancient Astrology, Volume 1, Demetra George. That's where I initially heard of it. And I just want to get a bunch of examples and make a lecture about it and teach other people how to use this technique. It's for people who have new moons or full moons within 15 degrees on either side. So for instance, look at this chart. This qualifies. If this was your chart, it would qualify. Sun and the moon within 15 degrees opposite, or within 15 degrees on either side of the sun by conjunction, you could be a candidate. It's really cheap, $45 for 45 minutes. The technique itself, I feel like it only takes 10 minutes out of the time. And then I just spend the rest of the time with you talking about your moon. It's a moon focused consult, or just whatever you want to talk about, in that 45 minutes. Just as they're steeply discounted. And if I do end up using you for my research, I de-identify everything. If I use it in a lecture, no one will know it's you. Everything will be, anonymized, if you will. So if you want to help me with that research, I would be so appreciative. I think that's it. I think that is all of the announcements. I'm going to be doing more of these videos outside of my monthly forecast. I'm starting to do more rising sign horoscopes. I'm starting to do more transit videos that are more specific in between the monthly forecasts. So stay tuned, even more than just monthly. There should be lots of other things happening if I'm keeping that work, if I'm doing my job. So again, thank you. I hope everyone has a great month. Happy Capricorn season. Antelope of the deep water. Go fish.